to get started. Yes, sir. How are you? Doing well. Thanks for coming out. We've had a good full day this morning already. Starting out at the VA hospital in Ann Arbor, we had a ribbon cutting there for their new entry and all the stuff they've done to make it a little easier for veterans to access the care there. And so we're always glad to be there. Debbie Dignell and I were there for that event. We generally try to show up there together. Veterans is a bipartisan issue that we can support. We ought to be supporting, so we're glad to do that. And I've been at Milan schools today, in Jackson and Ann Arbor. I don't know where else, but we've been around today. Looking forward to this weekend. Been trying to figure since my 3 radio interviews this morning what to say as a greeting for Memorial Day weekend. It doesn't seem appropriate to say Happy Memorial Day. We're happy at the outcome. We're happy at the fact that there are people that are willing to commit themselves to our country, to sacrifice, to do what's necessary to preserve our freedoms, but also pass that on to other countries where possible and necessary. And so we appreciate that. So I've been using the term, have a grateful Memorial Day. Maybe that's a better message, because we definitely ought to be grateful. Through no fault of my own or plan of my own, I was plopped down here in 1951, born with my twin brother, an American. And that's pretty special. With a long history of Americans who have stood for freedoms and opportunities that we have, and we take for granted. And now, again, and this has happened before, we're in a pretty divided country. And there are some people that are still angry about the last election. And I had on the plane last night as I walked on, a lady in front of me turned and said, are you a VIP? I said, no, I'm a member of Congress. She said, well, I thought that's what that pin was for. She says, where are you from? And we talked about that. And she says, well, I just hope you protect us from that man. So I had to ask. I said, what man are you talking about? Oh, it's the president, Trump. I said, well, I'm used to telling the truth, and I'm supporting our president. And I would think that at the very least we'd be happy about an economy that we have, about the fact that we're taking on China for abuses that they've undertaken against us for years, that presidents, both Democrat and Republican, have let go. I said, so I support that. I support his stand on our traditional values and support for our religious freedoms and all of that. So, oh, I don't know. And then one big old guy in front of her turned around and said, I've never been embarrassed about any of our leaders before, like I'm embarrassed about ours now. I said, well, that's the beauty of America. We can have disagreements. But in the end, it's a great opportunity for us to work together. Yesterday we had the first piece of legislation that passed from committee with a lot of debate, came out in a bipartisan vote, came to the floor of the House. Sadly, the leadership didn't follow regular orders, and they had made a manager's amendment that took some really good things out for education, both homeschool and public school. $529 that could have been used for tutoring expenses and the like, but they were removed because the teachers union pushed against it. In committee, they were all kept in, Ways and Means Committee. But nonetheless, it was still a good bill dealing with retirement issues. Had one of my bills in there that I've been working on for 4 years with Representative Wynn Rochester from Delaware, Democrat, good friend of mine. She knows, as a former Secretary of Labor in Delaware, what she's talking about. She helped me understand the policy even better. We got that into the bill. And it ended up being a good bill. But it'll go to the Senate. It'll pass the Senate, and the President is already committed to sign it. That's the first piece of legislation in 5 months we've been in session thus far that has come out of the House that has a chance of passing the Senate and to be signed by the President. The rest of them are all been for perception reasons or to get Republicans on vote as voting against something. That's good. And normally the title of the bill, Nancy, you remember this, some quick titles that are as positive as can be. And the title of the bill, for instance, protecting people with pre-existing conditions. We've already done that. And this bill that had that title didn't do that. But that was the title. And so you'll hear in the campaigns how some voted against it. That wasn't me. So that was a first sign, welcome, first sign of any type of bipartisanship. We did pass a bill last week. Sadly, we couldn't pass it in a bipartisan fashion. It passed out of committee, the committee in which I sit, Energy and Commerce, and it dealt with reducing the cost of prescription drugs. Generic drugs and other things were all involved in this piece of legislation. We had a full, regular set of hearings and then a markup of the bill in Energy and Commerce, and we passed it out in a unanimous vote, bipartisan. Came to the floor of the House, and again, they rolled in 4 more bills in a manager's amendment, 4 bills that I couldn't support, that continued some of the worst issues of the Affordable Care Act, reinserting those to a great bill that we had a unanimous support on, ultimately making it impossible to have unanimous vote out of the House. That went to the Senate. I hope they strip out those 4 bills, which I believe they will, and then pass the prescription drug cost reduction act and send that back to us when we send it to the President. So that's what's been going on. As far as the rest of the issues, I think you'll probably ask some questions that we can address those, and any we don't get to, I can add to the end of this town hall. But this hour is your time, and it generally goes pretty fast. So I'm going to ask Stephen if you'll help me make sure I don't miss a hand that's been up. We kind of go in order. What's your questions, concerns, or comments? Yes, sir.
There's 15 to 17 states that are trying to pass laws that they can do whatever they want with their electoral votes. Is there any way that we can get a federal law that regulates that so they cannot bypass electoral college?
Well, they can't bypass the electoral college, but what they're trying to do is say the popular vote is the vote that our state will take. So if the popular vote went for Hillary Clinton as it did last time, that if the state approves it, we fought against this in Michigan. They were trying to make a run at that before the last election. And we pushed back on it and squashed it. Because frankly, that takes away the ability for smaller states and smaller communities within states to have their votes counted. It just goes to the largest vote counts, the numbers, and that is then controlled by popular vote. The framers of our Constitution understand, wisely so, that if you had a straight popular vote, then New York, and in this day and age, New York, California, Texas, cities like New York City and Chicago and Los Angeles would carry the day. And the rest of us might as well not go to the polls. And so the issue is they have the right in the states to do that. The Constitution doesn't prohibit that. It still says that they will go with electoral college, but they will make their electoral voters, their electoral college voters in the state follow them and follow the popular outcome. There are, I think there are 10 states now. There are 15 that have adopted that, and thankfully so far Michigan isn't one of those. The majority of states that have done it has been pushed by Democrat states. The majority of those right now have gone for, in this case, the Democrat candidates in the past. So it really won't change anything per se. unless the states start to turn around and Colorado, California become more populated by Republicans, then it could be a problem. But we'll see. But that's not something we can change at the federal level, because they're not changing the Constitution. They're just changing their states' rights and how they allocate their electoral college members.
Is that brought up for a vote throughout your state?
This,
Do you guys just didn't make that law?
no. But again, this is not at the federal level.
I understand that.
This would be at the state level. It would have to be a referendum of the state. Either the legislature would pass it in a referendum, or it'd go to the state population. We'll keep informed if it ever starts to get to the point that direction. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you for taking my question.
Speak as loud as you can.
Okay. We have a problem with the deep state in Washington, D.C. and our government and the United Nations and Agenda 21 and insiders and others. What is, and the big government and increase, what can be done to stop the United Nations and taking over full control of our country? Because every time we make a treaty, we give more power to the international council than our House of Representatives and Senate.
Well, that's a great concern. And the concern was about the United Nations and the power that they have, and the international treaties that are made that we can come alongside of in the United Nations with our representation there. My response would be, is that's why we needed a president like Trump, who will stand up and appoint our own ambassador to the United Nations, like Nikki Haley, who on several occasions stood up and gave the United Nations what for? And a president who would step out and say, may have made a treaty in the past, but we're walking away from that, such as the Iran nuclear treaty, which wasn't worth the paper it was settled on, or the Paris climate agreement, which wasn't worth the paper it was settled on. And again, a lot of what's being talked about of what the United Nations has in control of the United States just hasn't happened. It's not in place. And with a president like we have now and Congress that will stand with him, as the House has, we've been able to push back against that. We'll continue to do that. I personally think it's time for the United Nations to find another place.
I think we should get out of the United Nations permanently.
There are smaller countries that would be run over by the United Nations if America wasn't there to protect them in certain cases. So there is that debate, but I don't think we should be paying what we're paying to house the United Nations on our shores. If they want to move it to The Hague or something like that, that'd be fine with me. But I think the United Nations has been very, very weak. Look what they haven't done in Venezuela. The UN ought to be in Venezuela. With the type of atrocities that's going on the people of Venezuela. Starving people. People that are being murdered. What's going on in Cameroon right now between the Anglophones and the Francophones. And outright genocide is taking place. Where is the United Nations? Other questions? Yes, sir.
Farming. What can you tell us about what's going on in Washington? Farming.
Yeah, the president talked today about $16 million to be put toward propping up farmers that are being impacted by the trade issues that are going on. Right now we have USMCA, which my farmers last week were feeling great relief that the tariffs on aluminum and steel had been lifted, and the milk tariffs from Canada's side had been lifted, and that Canada now is ready in their parliament, as we've had a number of parliamentarians come through, talk to us. That was the only thing holding them back from supporting USMCA fully. Mexico abided by the request to bump up their union labor law requirements in Mexico. They passed that in their parliament, so everything was set to go. And now it's Nancy Pelosi's chance to bring it up for a vote. That's all we're waiting for. The China trade deal is going to be a little longer. And that's where the president is coming and saying, we know we're going to have another round of cash support. It's not going to meet the full need. It absolutely won't. And when you have a chance to talk to a farmer, say thank you for your patriotism. Most of the farmers I've talked to or have called me are saying, we get it, we understand. We can't allow China to continue to do what they've been doing. We have to break them from that. If they don't agree to agreement, we ultimately have to break them. And now we're seeing, will that work better? Right? Is it on? There we go. If they won't agree to it, then we see, as we're seeing already, companies that are in China right now, who are moving to Vietnam, Malaysia, or other places. Some are being attempted to be ruled by the Chinese and saying, if you're going to leave, we're going to charge you a tax to move out of here and to take your equipment. I was told of one company today that said, well, okay, you can keep our equipment, we'll buy new, and left. And you know that those companies aren't going back to China, ever. And I think China is going to have to understand that, and I think they will, ultimately. And that's why it's good to know that our president is talking with President Xi regularly. And China's GDP, the economy is going down, the United States is going up, and continues to solidify. So yes, there will be subsidies given to the farm industry to try to carry them through, because it's having tremendous impact. Soybeans, pork, corn, to varying degrees that we've seen.
Back to the United Nations question. You said that with the atrocities that are going on down there, why isn't the United Nations taking a step into it? Because he's a dictator, or what's going on down there that we can't get in there to help him?
Yeah, I personally think that the United Nations is a toothless tiger, because you have countries in there so different and diverse in their understanding about what government is to be, what freedom's about. I mean, when you see some of these countries that are on the councils that they're on, peacekeeping, etc., who are some of the worst countries for disabling human rights initiatives in the world, and they're supposed to be there in a civil rights peacekeeping entity. That's why I say that the United Nations is probably way past its ability to do anything positive for this world, and America staying involved is simply to cast the no vote that stops running over some of the smaller countries that are still in the United Nations. But I mean, you look at those countries, why, you know, when I go over to Africa, for instance, I see the blue and white United Nations trucks, planes. Think of the airport at Entebbe, and I'll see the UN very clearly there. Well, right now, there's not all that much bad going on in Uganda. But I bet if I went over to Venezuela, I wouldn't see any blue or white vehicles there from the United Nations, or in Cameroon, or in Liberia. I think the only way we can change it is some new entity, and it comes from resources like NATO, for instance, has been a functioning entity. But again, we had a president just recently, if you remember, step up and say to the NATO allies, listen, we're tired of carrying you.
we're paying our fair share and more, and some of you aren't even paying your 1 or 2% that you're required of your GDP to pay to support NATO. Well, Germany stepped up after that. Several other countries stepped up and they're paying their full share. We don't have that power at the United Nations. And so the answer, as I gave before, is I think the United Nations has outlived its useful purpose. Unless it can show that it stands truly for freedom and civil rights in our nation, that includes places like Cuba and Venezuela. They're pretty much a toothless, costly tiger. Other questions? Yes, sir.
Every Republican runs on repeal and replace, and now in election for a couple of years. What happened? Health insurance bill. What happened?
The Senate stopped it.
Why?
Well, two reasons. Two reasons, and neither of them are good in my book. The first reason is in the Senate they have a set of rules like the House has. The Senate has a filibuster rule that is called a cloture rule. It's not simply a filibuster where you have to stand and talk like Mr. Smith goes to Washington until you drop over. You just have to ask for a cloture vote. A cloture vote is 60 votes. Republicans at that time only had 52, 51 votes, so they needed additional Democrats to support. Chuck Schumer simply told his caucus, we're not giving them those extra 7, 8, 9 votes necessary. And so he couldn't get cloture, so he couldn't bring a vote up for, or a bill even up for consideration. So on the issue of repeal and replace, Republicans in the House sent several of those bills over. The last, if you remember historically, came to a vote. Ultimately, we got it to a vote, and John McCain voted no. So those are the two reasons. The same would be for the wall. The House passed, I believe it was three occasions, full funding for building the wall, and also for some immigration reform, DACA issues. We had Goodlatte 1, Goodlatte 2. Neither of those bills were allowed to come up for debate in the Senate because of the cloture requirement. The president was ready to sign those bills I've just talked about. That's the reason.
Don't more Republicans worry if they don't get something done that they're not going to get reelected?
Well, of course. But that's why the House did the right thing in passing all those bills. But the people put us in the minority after this last election. They believed the media out there, sadly including Fox News, that doesn't tell the full story. And so you think that there are no Republicans supporting the president. Republicans overwhelmingly supported the president. Name one issue we did not support him in the House. And we didn't support it because he was Trump. We supported it because they were the right issues. And the president was ready to support those. And so when people don't understand that, all of a sudden they decide, we're going to stay home, we're going to take it out on our own party. And of course the liberals love that. And so now we have not only Democrats and liberals and progressives, as they call themselves, but we got people that are outspoken and saying, I'm a socialist Democrat, or a Democrat socialist. So here we are. I think as citizens, we have to be willing to do the homework that's necessary. Now, during my last term, because Trump was the president, Republicans controlled the House and controlled the Senate, at least in the numbers, a majority. These town halls were full, and people were shouting at me and putting signs up in the air. Now I only have one guy taking camera pictures of me tonight and recording every single thing I say. But that's how it was last time. But that's kind of gone away a bit now. But there's still relatively few people, thanks to you tonight for being here, but there should be a lot more people interested in what's going on. And so you need to talk to your friends and neighbors and say, listen, you're not hearing it from the media. You're not hearing it from either side of the media, the complete story. You're hearing what makes news, makes people angry on both sides, as opposed to what actually is happening and why it's happening that way. And that's why I still have town halls like this. I know I'm not going to get the media to cover me completely, the national media. We do press conferences all the time as Republicans, but we don't see it reported. That's a shame. We ought to have a free press. We need it. And maybe these years will help that be pushed again. But that's why. I mean, there are a number of things we want to see done. We'll keep pushing. On the other side of the ledger, there's some significant bipartisanship. There are workhorses and show horses in Washington. I'm considered a workhorse, and we were rated as the most effective member of the Michigan delegation, and the 30th most effective member of the Republican Conference, 244 members. And still, I'm also rated as the most conservative member of the Michigan delegation, and one of the top conservatives in the House and Senate as well. So I think you can be a conservative. I've never lied to you about that, but you can also be effective in getting things accomplished and signed into law. So, other questions, and we'll come back here. Yes, sir.
I got a question. Thank you.
We have a treaty maker, Robert Latham, sir. The treaty.
Lighthizer?
Yeah, I said his name right. But he's been in the Council of Foreign Relations for the last 20 years, supporting the socialist and communist activities. He's traveling around the country, making contracts, selling this country out, and the president, he's not telling the president the truth about what his actual goal is. He carries the same goal that the United Nations has. And really, don't believe me, look it up, the United Nations Agenda 21 and 2030. The people have to look it up online, and they will know what the goals are of that group.
Well, we're not supporting Agenda 21. That has not been brought up for a vote even under Obama. We're not supporting that. Lighthizer, I have no information like that. I've met with Lighthizer myself. Sometimes what's reported online or in a magazine isn't necessarily the full facts. My relationship with Lighthizer in looking at what he's been doing on trade and the negotiations with China, I felt very comfortable with him. And he's speaking for the best interest, and Trump is making sure he does. Speaking for the best interest of America. I think we've seen that in the USMCA, replacement for NAFTA. USMCA puts America and North America on the top of the heap. And we'll keep watching, but I've heard nothing like that about Lighthizer. Okay?
I'd like to know where you stand on Justin Amash. You said Republicans overwhelmingly support President Trump. See, like things that Justin Amash has said here recently, is it because his tool company mission tool is made in China? Is that why you don't think he's done?
Justin isn't a Republican. Justin is a libertarian.
Okay.
You have to understand that. And Justin, he ran as a Republican, but he'll tell you he's a libertarian. Justin has never been supportive of our delegation. Justin, if you ask him, will tell you the truth as he understands it, and he will argue with you on the truth, and it's his truth that's the truth. I'm saying it as kindly as I can, but Justin is he's his own man, and when Trump took him on, I think rightly so, Justin has never forgiven President Trump for that. Justin Amash. Justin Amash, if you look at his voting record, votes more with Nancy Pelosi than he does with the Republicans.
I've always heard that to possess the name of man, one must first be one.
To possess the name of man, you first must be one. Well, I'm not going to comment on that on Justin. Justin has his right to be there in Congress. He was elected I think three times now. Four times now he's been elected. His takes in Grand Rapids, Berry County, Calhoun County. That's pretty much his district. He butts up against my Eaton County, a portion of my district. And I used to represent Calhoun County myself before redistricting, and they took Calhoun away and gave Monroe County to me. That was John Dingles before me. So my only answer there, Justin is his own guy. He votes with one other person regularly. That's Thomas Mast, who's also libertarian. Thomas Massey, not Mast. Ruth.
Can you talk a little bit about Vice President Pence? I'd like to see more of Vice President Pence. I hardly ever see him on TV or anywhere else unless I go looking for him. What are your interactions with him, or what is he doing, or what can you tell us about him?
Well, vice presidents you don't always see too much of. You heard a lot about Biden. You didn't necessarily see him, but you heard about his statements at times. Mike Pence doesn't make those type of statements. Mike's a personal friend of mine. He and I were served in the House together. He was the guy that invited me to the Bible study I'm still in. Mike's the real deal. His wife Karen is the real deal. And my wife and Karen are still very close friends. Mike is a loyal person, but he's also a guy at the appropriate times, which is generally with the president, behind the scenes, very open and willing to give his position. And I'm sure there are times when Mike has said to the president, you might rethink that statement. It might have come off a little better had you not done that. But I think also, if you've seen that this president's stance for traditional values, for life, for traditional marriage, for freedom of speech, it's an evidence that at the very least, he has some good counselors that are helping him to understand more and more. I think I could argue that the positions that this president has taken on those traditional value issues, religious freedom and others, has been as strong, if not stronger, than Ronald Reagan. And that is tough to say. Now, is he the same personality as Ronald Reagan? No, not at all, not at all. But his policy and his leadership and what we're seeing happen in our economy, in our strength in the world, is pretty impressive. When you stop and think about it now, the last president said, it just kind of laughed. Anyone that think they can get over 2% GDP growth must have a magic wand. Well, I think the magic wand is free market capitalism, leaving the hands and the money in the hands of the public themselves, businesses that create jobs, and it works. We have 7 million jobs. Thankfully, CSI is trying to help us with that, to fill those jobs. And other places like CSI, we've got 7 million jobs going wanting for people to fill those jobs because either they lack the skills or they've had perverse incentives to not work, or they are truly disabled and incapable of work. And we have to change the first two groups. We have to get them upgraded in their skills, and CSI and other places like that are attempting to do that and retrain people as well so they can bump themselves to another job, and that new job opens up for somebody who's been trained. So that's an example of what's taking place. 3.6% unemployment, the last unemployment figures. It's the best since just after I graduated from high school in 1969. So when people talk about it not working, and what even kills me more is when they say, oh, that's carryover from Barack Obama. Okay, that's what you want to think. I'm glad it's still working, and the leadership is showing. When I travel to other parts of the world, whether it's Europe or Africa, I hear the general public speaking very positively about our president. The parliamentarians I meet with, presidents and prime ministers I've met with, who feel very good about President Trump. I remember one African prime minister who said he went to bed thinking that the president had lost, that Trump had lost. He was candidate at the time. He was awakened by one of his aides and given the message that Trump won. And he said, I jumped out of my bed and said, hallelujah. So he told me personally. And so, again, what you hear in the news, certainly there are some parliamentarians, some groups that would like to see a different style of president because it's a different America then. But the ones that like him, especially leaders, say we feel safer as a country when America is as strong as it can be. Other questions?
What do you think is going to happen in England?
With Brexit, what's going to happen in England?
May stepped down today.
Yeah, she stepped down, or she announced her resignation, Theresa May, as of June 7th, or sooner. If Parliament would decide on a new Prime Minister sooner, she would step down. But I think she felt that she wanted to see Brexit carried out, in her mind, in a little stronger way. But I think Great Britain has found out, like America, that the general public, in certain cases, says, no, we don't want any type of status quo. I'm not here to make a statement on how Brexit should be carried out. But I like the idea when sovereign countries decide that they want to be sovereign. It's not like our 50 independent states that sadly need to be more independent than less. But nonetheless, that's different than a group of sovereign countries joining together and then being rammed around, kind of like we have a problem with the United Nations and the concern there. So she's stepping down, and we'll see what happens. I don't think that impacts our relationship with Great Britain and how we work with them much. We will work with that country as it shapes up. And I think, generally speaking, Great Britain, in majority, is still a strong ally of the United States, and we of them also.
Tim, thanks for coming to Hudson.
We need a good chiropractor to adjust it.
All right. So you and I have talked several times, including a couple months ago at your Washington, D.C. office about the Medicare system. Actually, any day, the American Chiropractic Association is ready to drop a bill that would give seniors an additional option. We talk about the opioid crisis, the escalating costs. I just want to get your feedback and maybe edification about the Medicare system and what you see needs to change in that system.
Yeah, I think, first of all, the Medicare system is too much a one-size-fits-all. And I think it needs to be made more flexible to meet the needs of individual choices. And then when we think of medical care or health care, let's make it broader, health care, what works for you and has positive impact, and in the case of opioids, for instance, keeps you using less, if not using no opioids, as a result of, say, a chiropractic care, or some holistic care, or care with acupuncture. At Walter Reed Hospital, acupuncture is used, and people find care, including a nurse I sat and talked with while I was there having a checkup myself, who found great care for a back injury she had, and she couldn't take opioids and be on the job. So acupuncture did it for her. And so I think there ought to be expansions. I'm not saying it just because you're a chiropractor. I think there ought to be flexibility. It says, listen, if it's legitimate and you're staying within your scope of practice, the training that you have, we ought to care for that. especially in many cases when it'll reduce the cost and increase the health. So we'll look forward to seeing that. Yes?
Why is
Let
it
me
so
get the,
difficult?
Mic over there.
Why is it so difficult to get an infrastructure bill passed?
Two reasons. Why it's so difficult to get an infrastructure bill passed. Dollars that it'll take. Maybe three reasons. The approach by which you'll find the dollars. And this president has said in his plan that he put out a year ago, a year and a half ago, sometime around that. He expects the federal government to care for part of that infrastructure, certainly with the federal highways and bridges that we have responsibility for. He expects the states to step up and put money toward the repair of the roads, and he expects industry to do it as well. And his reason for industry is saying they're the ones that benefit. They're the ones that transport their goods, their service, their products on the highways, the roads, the bridges, and he includes infrastructure as that which is under the ground as well, under the highways, including broadband, internet capabilities, communication capabilities. So the first issue is the cost. The second is the approach that will be taken, and the third is getting agreement from the other party to sit down and negotiate in fair negotiation. That broke down this week, as you know, when just before that meeting, the speaker holds a press conference and says that the president is involved in cover-up and impeachable offenses, though she's not calling for impeachment. She's trying to hold her own back from doing impeachment because she knows that will fall right in the president's hands. American public, I think, has had enough of that. But those are the reasons. And
What's the solution?
the solution is for Nancy Pelosi to say, in all good faith, Mr. President, I'm willing to sit down and negotiate, just like Mike Shirkey, Lee Chatfield, and Governor Whitmer did on the health care the insurance bill. So I think that's the issue. And right now, the president met and kind of shocked us when it came out of the first meeting they had on infrastructure. Said, we've come to agreement of $2 trillion for infrastructure. I swallowed hard when I heard $2 trillion. Our total national budget is just under $4 trillion. So where's he going to find that? Well, I think he's going to find it in the state, in industry, as well as the federal government. But that will be where the negotiation is between the party leadership and ultimately between the House and Senate members of Congress with the president. But it has to start. And I think the people want to see it start. We were fortunate in getting done under Barack Obama a bipartisan vote that passed the Highway Trust Fund bill for a 5-year extension. We're living under that now, which gave the states the ability to know what dollars are coming from the feds. But we need to move beyond that. So I'm ready. I'm ready for that, and I was hoping that I got a copy of the letter that the president sent to Speaker Pelosi and Minority Leader Schumer the night before they were supposed to meet that said, I'm looking forward to our meeting, and I'm paraphrasing here and summarizing. I'm looking forward to our meeting tomorrow on infrastructure. But in order to have a good meeting on that, I need you to commit to passing the USMCA. We have to get that done. And that's how it was left. But then between then and their meeting, as I said, Speaker Pelosi had that press conference where she said the president is guilty of a cover-up and of impeachable offenses. And if I were the president going into a meeting that was going in good faith, knowing that there would be disagreements, yeah, there was difference of opinions, but I had someone coming out and saying, this president is committing cover-up and impeachable offenses. And now, of course, she's saying he should take a leave of absence. It's pretty hard to take. Not a great way to negotiate. And so he stepped away. Other questions? Yes, sir.
I think the main solution would be if they would stick to the Constitution of the United States and stand by that, they would have less problems and less crises.
I couldn't say it any better than you. You know, I think this unique little document here is pretty understandable, pretty literal. There may be a couple amendments here that I disagree with, but they are the Constitution, and we live by that. But my friends on the other side of the aisle, many of them say it's a living, breathing document, and so it is what we say it is. I don't agree with that. I think that gets us and has gotten into us a lot of problems. Other questions?
You talked about the great job that President Trump is doing with the economy. Now he's getting ready to go to Japan this weekend and a lot of other places in the world coming up. Is he going to do equally as well on the world stage? Can you talk about that? What's he trying to accomplish, and talk about that?
Well, I'm glad he's going to Japan. I hope he says to him, you got to stop putting those excessive taxes on our Harley Davidsons, or we're going to put some additional taxes and tariffs on your Hondas, and Yamahas, and Suzukis. And I have a Honda, and I have a Harley, and I want them both to be treated fairly. So I hope that he does that. I think Japan has seen the evidence of his strength already in what the deal he got with Korea, in the upgrade of the Korean trade agreement, which so far everybody who's connected to that likes in the United States. I haven't talked with Koreans about that, but the United States likes it a lot. Farmers, manufacturers, etc. So Japan has to have seen what's taking place. They've seen what's taken place with European Union. European Union backed down after Trump pushed them on the issues of energy, fuel. Germany got the what for what they were doing with Russia in violation of the NATO agreements. So thus far, he does pretty well on the world stage. And as I've said, when I talk with the people and leadership, and they don't have to say that to me, as I've met in numerous countries around the world, and will shortly have an opportunity again, I hear an appreciation. Oh, they chuckle about the tweets. That's always good for a laughter and breaking the ice. But they like his strength. You'll have demonstrators, just like we have in the United States. Paid demonstrators. That's what they do. They're professional demonstrators. And they're brought in to do the demonstrating. And you'll see that. But the general public, most people feel good when America's strong, because they know that we are a big dog on the block. And while we're peaceful, yet will not be pushed around. And we see that with Iran right now. Other. We've got about 7-8 more minutes, and I don't want to take that from you. Is there anything being done about the border wall? Yes and no. It always seems to be two answers, right? Yes, the money that we have given the president, 1.7, is being used. And of course now they're saying, oh, he's not building a new wall. No, he's fixing a wall that had crumbled. And shouldn't you do that? I mean, if you leave the crumbled wall and then you put up new wall, you've got a big border of crumbled wall and a brand new shorter border of new wall. So he's doing both, and that's the authorization we gave him in the agreement, that he was secure the border with all types of stuff with that 1.7 $1 billion. And so yeah, is it enough yet? No. No, that's why we have a crisis at the border. That's why we had in the last 2 months over 100,000 illegals. I'm not talking about whether they're good people, nice people, needy people, or bad people. They were illegal, coming across the border where there was not a wall, or where they just simply were able to get to the point of stepping over and saying, I want asylum. And these poor Border Patrol agents, the law says they have to countenance that and accept it. Ultimately, better than 80% of the people that claim asylum, when they are checked out, they don't get asylum and they're sent back. But in the meantime, most of those people, because we're being overrun, end up here with us trying to take care of them and running out of space to do that. Or they're released in the general population and we never see most of them again until some of them, as we found out last week, murder people. And so, yes, we're doing something about the border wall, but it's not enough yet.
Why doesn't he use some of the seized drug money? Last president was giving seized drug money to some of the community organizing bodies.
The president is using any legal funding mechanism he can, including bringing military personnel to the border as well, and using them legally. And there's some things he can't use them in legally, and he's not using them illegally. But it's such a mess. And again, it started back with Reagan, sadly, who accepted the promise of Democrats if he allowed those 5 million to just stay there, that they would help him out on some other issues. It hasn't worked out well, and it just added to and added to. And we've got to get a handle on it. And I think one of the best ways is require any asylum seeker, they must seek asylum in their own country, at our embassy, or at the closest country they come to America, at our embassy there, or consulate. That makes all good sense. Why put them through being preyed upon by coyotes, the dollars they have to pay to get up here, when in fact they're going to be sent home, in many cases. Yes, sir.
So another kind of concern that I've seen over the past several months, some of the big tech companies like Facebook and Google, they're starting to label a lot of communication as misinformation, when in fact it may be factual, and it's pushing an agenda. And I just want to get your thoughts on this whole big push. It seems related to media and so forth, of making people think something that actually isn't fully true.
Again, that's the danger of the social media. If it's left wide open, there will be things said on that social media that none of us in a free society would countenance as positive. But yet, we have a First Amendment, except for crying fire in a crowded room when there's not a fire. And if you go to my Facebook or my Twitter account or to my Instagram, you'll find a lot of statements you can assume that I don't like. And there's a reason why I limit my reading of my own social media, and my staff has to inform me at times, because it's just not good or productive to read. But this is America. And on a college campus or on a Facebook or an Instagram, there ought to be, if you say it is going to be open and free, except for libelous statements where you slander a person, that's a different story. We have we have laws in place that can put you in jail for those type of things. But on the other stuff, it might be unsavory, but there's a problem if I expect Facebook to be an open format and then I find out that there are conservatives entities that are being kept off it. I wonder about that. And I would hope I would say the same thing for liberal entities. So.
You say there are laws in relationship to slander. President Trump is slandered every day. So I believe there are laws. My curiosity stems from why isn't someone pressing charges against the people slandering my president? I am a Vietnam-era veteran. I spent 4 years there, and he has an army at his disposal. And we feel if the government won't do anything about it, well, watch the veterans. They're going to come to light for you here pretty soon. Because we're talking about the people, we the people, they're tired. The veterans are really tired. We want something done.
I appreciate that. He's a public official.
Yes, sir.
You can't slander a public official.
Well,
I can't be slandered. Why can't I be? Because I've stepped out in the public arena and have accepted, sadly, what people say about me.
so when he steps
You can
down,
be slandered because you didn't put yourself out in the public.
you're gonna let it.
Yeah, but you're not elected now. If you are elected in performing your functions as an elected official, people can say stuff about you, and that's not slander. If they threaten your life, as I've had those threats, then they've got problems. Then law can be used. But just bad statements, ill-tempered statements, slander, we in the public eye, we have to accept it. And it's too bad. It's too bad. Well, I want to say thank you. But thank you. Have you received your Vietnam pin? Would you like to receive it? I got a crack staff who picks it up. We've had the privilege over the last 3 years to be able to give out this 50th anniversary pin for Vietnam era veterans, 1955 to 75. And it's been my privilege to give out hundreds of these. But we still find some who haven't received it, been where I've been at. So
Let me give this to you after you tell us name, your ending rank, and your branch of service.
United States Air Force, 1971 to 1975, Sergeant E4.
And name.
Darcy Solomon.
Darcy Solomon. Darcy, I want to say thank you on behalf of the grateful nation for your service, your valor, your sacrifice, and the fact that when your nation called you, you came. God bless you and welcome home.
It was my pleasure.
I've had the privilege of meeting almost every veteran service member that I've ever met who said the same thing, they would do it all over again. So.
We hear a lot about World War II, veterans, and everything like that. And also, we had a war. The Korean War, several hundred times more.
If you have an opportunity to visit the Korean War Memorial in Washington, take that opportunity. The Korean War, the Vietnam War were two wars that, they were classified as not being wars. Well, you were there, you know there's a war. You were there, you know there's a war. But the Vietnam War veterans were the first veterans that were welcomed home without welcome. And that's one of the reasons why the Vietnam War, why we are trying at the very least to say welcome home. My father-in-law served in the Korean War as well. And when he came home, at least America did what it was supposed to do. It said, welcome home, thanks for your service. And so I say thank you to Korean War veterans. But if you go to the Korean War Memorial, along with the Vietnam War Memorial, those are my two favorite. Second World War is an amazing memorial. But if you look, and I'd encourage you to go to the Korean War Memorial at night in January. Why do I say that? Because you'll see the figures there, and they're just a little larger than life, and they're carrying what they would have carried in the Korean War. The communication system, the radio, the correct weapons, backpacks, helmets, and the rest. They're walking through the type of flora fauna that would be what they were in. And then alongside of this, the statues, there's a wall, a black wall, that has etched into it additional military personnel. So it looks like a platoon that's there. And you look in the eyes of those statues, and you can see the fear, the concern, the worry of young men in a strange place, in a very difficult combat setting. And then you get to the end of that, and I won't give away the punchline. You have to read what's etched into the marble stone walkway about what they were doing and why they were there. You know, there's someone potentially on that Vietnam War Memorial wall that took my place. I went in the recruitment depot, and I walked the red, yellow, and green lines, bent over when I was asked to bend over, and took the tests and all of that. The military never called me. But someone went. And so that long wall is impressive and emotional to me. But that Korean War Memorial is something else to see. So thanks for bringing that up. What I was going to say, be grateful in this Memorial Day weekend. Enjoy the cookouts, enjoy the fishing, enjoy the family get-togethers. But be grateful for our veterans who didn't come home, and others who did, and some who haven't come home yet but are here, that we still wrestle with their concerns. And then be thankful that we're Americans. Thanks for being here.